My name is Laura Badmaev, and I'm the founder of the ASXL Rare Research Endowment Foundation. I'm thrilled to be joined here today by our executive director, Amanda Johnson. Amanda, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to our
Yeah,
foundation?
absolutely. I worked in nonprofit organizations my whole career. I started working with the Pulmonary Hypertension Association after I graduated from college. So that was my first real exposure to the rare disease community. I had a really, it was really was an administrative role working directly with the president of the organization. So I got to see how every aspect of the organization worked from his perspective. And I think that was really when I realized that nonprofits were the right place for me, and really started to appreciate what the power in rare disease. So from there, I worked in a couple of other places. I worked for a direct service organization in Washington, D.C. called DC Central Kitchen, where I worked on individual giving, so really more of a fundraising focused role. And then prior to coming here, I worked for a professional association called the Association for Research in Vision and Ophthalmology, which is a mouthful, but it's a professional organization for researchers whose work focuses on the eye and the visual system. And that was really where I learned about academic research and how grants work and how um, academics are trained. And I think it was really bringing those three experiences together that when this opportunity became available with the ARRE Foundation at the end of 2020, it just was, I think I even told you when we met for the first time that it just felt like this was the center of my past professional Venn diagram. And that's how I came here.
Absolutely. I think the combination of the rare disease, the entrepreneurial nonprofit, as well as your experience in research has made you a huge asset to
Yeah,
catapult
thanks.
us into the future.
Yeah.
So we're thrilled to have you here for our first Fireside Chat series.
Yeah, thanks.
There's been a lot happening behind the scenes that we want to let families know about as they're coming along on this journey. In the past year, there's been a lot of development work around new resources for families. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a couple of slides just to sort of help share. So one is the ASXL resource library. This is a tool on the ARRE Foundation website, and that's where we store any and all information that is useful to families. So recordings from our past conferences, both our virtual conference in 2021 and some of the in-person conferences where we've been able to do recordings. Those are all parsed out and available there. We have two different articles that were written at the end of last year. One is about sort of the genetics 101, how genetics work in ASXL related disorders. And then another one that talks about the complexity of ASXL related disorders and how they're a part of the epigenetic system, and what that means in the context of the ASXL gene. So there's those two articles there. And then any of the webinars that we've recorded throughout the years are all posted there as well.
Excellent. Yeah, I've attended some of the webinars this year, and it was really helpful to see, what's been
Yeah.
happening, and things that maybe are new findings around like kidneys, urinary. I know especially was a challenge for our son, so it's great
Yep.
to have this available to the
Yeah,
families.
yeah, absolutely. And then one of the other pieces that we launched at the beginning of this year and has just been incredibly impressive to see grow is the ASXL Care Directory. So this was the brainchild of another Bohring-Opitz Syndrome parent, Jamie Ordauer, and it's really a crowdsourced directory of doctors and other types of healthcare providers like therapists who have experience treating individuals with an ASXL related disorder. So I think as a lot of parents will appreciate, you become an expert in our disorders by treating one child, given their rarity. And so we are up to just about 100 providers in the directory across 6 different countries and 22 different medical specialties. So this is also available on our website. You can filter it by geographic location, specialty. I think those are the two sort of primary filtering fields. And I think the important thing to emphasize about this project is not only is it a tool for families to find doctors who have seen another child with an ASXL related disorder, it's also part of a bigger plan to build true expertise in ASXL related disorders. And through this project, we've actually identified 3 clinicians who are seeing multiple kids that we didn't know of before this. And that's how we ultimately are going to work our way towards something like standards of care, where you need doctors who truly have experience seeing multiple children and can participate in a larger process to develop clinical standards of care, which I think everybody, all the parents in our community agree is a really big priority. So this, just getting the directory put together is the near-term goal is part of this longer-term outcome that's directly related to this project.
Absolutely. I think building our body of medical knowledge is critical, and we
Yep.
highly encourage all the families, use
Yep.
this directory as a resource if you're trying to find a certain specialist, or if there are specialists that you recommend, who you love, that you would like other families to see, please add them. You're able to do that on the site.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've had a couple of questions from families before they submit is, they'll say something like, my doctor only sees my child, and that's okay. That's part of this process of building expertise. And the only criteria is, would you recommend this provider to another family? Because I think everybody probably has doctors they wouldn't recommend. But if you do recommend that provider to another family, that's all they need to be a part of this directory.
Excellent. Great.
Yeah.
So, many of the families have been on this uncertain journey, navigating with our children. And you conducted a survey trying to understand the priorities of our families. A lot of them want to know more about their child's disorder.
Mm-hmm.
What does the future hold for their children? What is the foundation doing to address these areas?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we are investing in the UCLA registry. So this is the registry that's run by Dr. Bianca Russell at UCLA. The foundation just in the last couple of weeks has announced that we'll be supporting the registry with a $50,000 research grant through the next year to continue data collection. And really what we're after going forward is what we call longitudinal data, right? So we want to make sure that we have an understanding of what these disorders look like over time, right? And I think, as you mentioned, when we did this family priority survey, that was one of the number one things that families wanted to know more about, right? Like, what are the characteristics of my child's disorder, and what can I expect into the future? And in order to do that, we have to collect data on that longitudinal or sort of regular routine basis over a period of years. And so through our funding, we are working with Dr. Russell on truly turning the registry at UCLA into a longitudinal study, which is really, really exciting. And I should also mention Dr. Meena Balasubramanian at the Sheffield Children's Hospital in the UK has also just launched an ASXL3 specific natural history study there. So the ASXL3 community has two opportunities to participate in some really exciting long-term data collection.
Absolutely, yeah. It's exciting to see the expansion of these into more longer term studies, so we can really see what happens with our children over time. I know in the short term, there's also been some work done by our scientific officer around some concept disease maps, which is a resource that families can use right now. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is really, really exciting. There's an example of one of them up on the screen here. So the sort of research terminology that we've been using internally is this disease concept map. And the better way to describe them, I think, to the larger family population in general is it's a list of symptoms and clinical features that have been published in the medical research. And so what these are is it's looking at any of the symptoms or clinical features that have been written about in a research paper. Our scientific advisor has gone through every single paper, counted every single person, counted every single symptom, plotted that all out, and we've been able to make these charts. And so I think this is important for a couple of reasons. One, I think it does give families the opportunity to get a fuller picture of what concerns or challenges are out there for their child's disorder. And it is also reflective of why it's so important for families to participate in research. Because unless your child is in the published research, it just doesn't count, which is sad and disappointing, I think, for families to hear that. But I think that's one of the biggest goals that we have as the foundation is we take the rich anecdotal information that is in each disorder has its own Facebook group. We have to figure out a way to get that anecdotal information that's in this closed private Facebook group out into the medical research to help support more studies, more insights, more of this natural history, and that's how we pave the path for other families to come, right? So that when 5 years from now, when a child is newly diagnosed, this information exists in the medical literature, and that's one way that families can help both pay it forward for future families, but it also benefits current and existing families, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, Alex is just not even a young adult yet, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure, you would love to know what his teenage years looks like, what his early 20s look like. And there are families now who have kids that are that age who can help pave that path for other families as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, most recently we were part of this puberty study and got to see some of the results, which are also part of the resource library. So
Yep.
it's really helpful to know what to expect in the
Yep.
future. And I wish we had a tool like this
Yeah.
when Alex was first diagnosed. And we know, there's a big clinical spectrum for our children.
Right.
So not everything may apply here, but at least gives you some indications of what to expect, what to talk to
Yeah.
your doctors about, and who you might need to engage in questions that you may
Right.
have.
Yep. Exactly. And I think that's a good point about these charts as well. Is just because there's a symptom included here, it does not mean that your child will have this symptom or feature. It's truly reflective of, I think we all know that there's a huge spectrum within these disorders, and even people with the same specific genetic variant can have really different clinical symptoms and features. And so this is really, as you said, it's an opportunity to start a conversation with your child's care team and say, should we be looking for this? Do you see any signs of this? Because we know it exists in at least one other individual who has the same disorder as my child.
Absolutely. And I think on an ongoing basis, seeing, there will be additional reports coming from the registry over time. So something to look for as we move into next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So switching gears a bit, so the ARRE Foundation's mission is centered on research, which you've highlighted of how important that is. Can you talk more about some of the recent research studies that our families have participated in? What does this mean for us in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned one of the studies from this year, which is the puberty study.
Yes.
So this was there's a cool backstory to it. So at our 2022 conference at UCLA, there's an undergraduate student who sat in on the puberty education session for families, and she was really intrigued by the topic and the conversation, and she reached out to Dr. Rebecca Hicks, who was the endocrinologist who presented that session, and asked if she could do a survey of our community. And so working with Dr. Russell in the registry and Dr. Hicks, she put this survey together. So that's that was earlier this year. I think that closed in June, and they're just starting to sort of analyze the data. It hasn't been published yet, but they were very generous to share the data with our families in a webinar a couple of weeks ago. So that's one. Of course, there is the actual registry and biobank at UCLA. That is our number one priority to push families to. It is inclusive of ASXL1, ASXL2, and ASXL3. There is the registry side of things, which is providing some demographic information, sort of an intake survey, getting a sense of the sort of health and development of your child, and then moving into these annual surveys. So that's where we start to get that longitudinal data. And then attached to that is what we call the biobank. And that's where Dr. Russell and her colleagues collect blood samples, and in some cases, fibroblasts, which come from, it's called a skin punch biopsy, which is just a little sample of skin that's taken and provides a different cell type that they can do additional and very important experiments in the lab with. And so we were very, very eager to push families to participate, certainly in the registry piece, and if possible, the biorepository as well.
Excellent. And how did they find out about how to get involved in the registry?
Yeah. So we have a page on our website that's called the registry. The long and short of it is you send an email to the team at UCLA, let them know you're interested, and there's a wonderful coordinator there named Julia who will get back to you. And my advice is to have your genetic report ready. That's the first thing that they'll ask for. You could even attach it probably when you reach out to Julia, and that starts the process. And if you do the biosample collection, so the blood, or what would likely just be blood at first, they can work with you to line that up with another blood draw that your child already has scheduled, or if they're going in for a surgery or a procedure, they can they can get that sample at the same time. And then also at our conference in 2024, we will be doing blood draws and potentially some of the skin biopsies as well. So there's a big opportunity to participate in research at our conference in 2024.
And speaking of the conference, where will the conference be next year?
Yeah, so the conference will be in Baltimore, Maryland, so the east coast of the U.S., at an institution called the Kennedy Krieger Institute, which is a world-renowned both care facility and research institute that specializes in developmental disabilities. So it is so perfectly aligned to our family community. And there's also tons of experts there who are just so used to working with our population or populations like ours, and really, really excited that we're going to have speaking at the conference some of the world's absolute experts in some areas that are of really significant, like big significance to our families, including behavioral dysregulation. They have an incredible neuropsychiatric program there, and just really, I'm very, very excited to have access to the experts at Kennedy Krieger Institute.
Absolutely. I think that will continue to expand our network, which in the last 5 years has already grown from like 10 to, over 70 professionals. 70. Yep. So it's really exciting to see that continued growth.
Yep.
You're in close contact with a lot of these different researchers who are studying all our ASXL genes and taking care of our kids. What are you hearing from them in terms of what they need from our community?
Yeah, so I think data, so that's something like participating in the registry, filling out the surveys, and I think we understand that it can be burdensome to families to do that, but for families who have capacity and the interest in participating in research, just we cannot underscore enough how important and significant that is. And then biological samples, especially for ASXL2. There are only between 2 and 3 samples for ASXL2 in the world right now that our researchers have access to. Wow. And we have 2 early career scientists, both at UCLA and at the University of Toronto, who are really interested in ASXL2, but they just don't have enough samples to do the work. And I think that's largely true across ASXL1 and ASXL3 as well. They are also interested in more of those samples. So again, reach out to the email. It's ASXL-chromatin-registry@mednet.ucla.edu. You can put that on the slides after we post this recording, but that's the best way to get them what they need.
Absolutely. I think, seeing, we've gotten to have the opportunity to see some of the outputs, of the work that they've done and certain patterning and similarities with other diseases, and that can lead to faster paths to treatment. So this is really critical for families to participate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of those researchers at UCLA, it's the Arboleta lab, Val Arboleta's lab at UCLA. They've with the samples that were collected at our conference in 2018, the very first one, very early days, they've been using those samples to do some really interesting work and in identifying where ASXL1, where there are some potential pathways in terms of understanding what this gene is doing, what it's controlling downstream, and that's all been made possible because of the samples that they have, and they have quite a few of them. And so that's where you can really see, is it signal, is it noise, is it as one of the researchers described, are we seeing what we're seeing because it's a function of the gene, or is it a function of like how we handled the sample, right? Because there's always going to be human error. So having more samples helps us really get to like, what is the true answer?
Absolutely. Yeah. So what do you think are some of the foundation's biggest accomplishments for this past year?
Yeah. So I think what's here on the screen is what I'm personally most proud of. Getting these charts out to the family community, I think, is something that has allowed us to be really responsive to what families are looking for and what the needs are. The care directory as well. That's something that I remember when I started with the foundation in early 2021, we did a survey of families then just to sort of get a pulse on the community, and increasing the number of clinicians was, at the top of that list at that time. And so that care directory is helping us work towards progress in that area. Another thing that's been happening behind the scenes that I think most families are probably not deeply aware about is the development of our research roadmap. which is our strategic plan for our future investments in the ASXL research community. And so over the last year, we've been working with an organization called Combined Brain. It's a consortium of other groups like us that work in the neurodevelopmental disorders. And our scientific advisor, Rachel Heilman, and some of her colleagues, student colleagues, have developed this lengthy manuscript, almost 80 pages, that documents everything we know about how what the genes do, how they work, what we know about each disorder from a clinical perspective, and then lays out what the gaps are that are standing in our way to making progress from finding drugs or therapies or other interventions that work for our disorders. And this is really, it truly is a roadmap. It's laying out for us what our immediate next steps need to be. Where do we go, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? It's really exciting to have that down on paper, and it's giving the leadership of the foundation a framework to make decisions about both how much money we need to raise and then how we spend it.
Can you talk about some of the opportunity areas as it relates to, like understanding some of the causes and maybe like the antibody work, as well as,
Yeah.
The outcome measure piece and how that plays a critical role?
Yeah, absolutely. So the path to drug development is long, and there's a lot of steps that you have to check off in the box along the way. The very first is the therapeutic discovery, right? Like what sort of intervention is going to have a positive effect in quality of life for families or changing symptoms. And the ASXL genes and the proteins and the disorders are so complex that we still don't have a handle on that yet. And so there's a lot of basic research that we need to invest in to figure out what's happening and why, and how we can make a change that at a scientific level that ultimately has a positive outcome in the human, right? And then there's what's called sort of preclinical work, and that is once you have a therapeutic target, you have to test it. So you test it in cells, and that's where the sample collection goes. We come back to the sample collection. In different types of animal models. And so that's another priority, right? Is we need to make sure that while this therapeutic discovery piece is going, we're also working on making sure we have mice or other animal models that are ready. The second we have a potential treatment, we have a place to test it. And then the next step over from that is actually clinical trials, right? So once we know it's safe to move into humans, we have to have the right ruler to be able to say, your child is now on this treatment. Did they make a change? And is it a change that's meaningful? And we have to know what we're actually measuring, right? So we can't just generally say, yes, my child is better. And what domains are they better? Is their communication improved? Are their motor skills improved? Are they performing better on like a cognitive test? And so we have to find what those measures are and make sure they're validated and we know they work in our population. So that's a huge piece of the puzzle that we're working on. And the really good news is there are a lot of other groups like us who are working on this as well. And we're part of a couple of consortia that are working on this together. And so that is really exciting as well.
Absolutely. It's exciting to see the collaborations and partnerships in the rare disease space, and where there are common needs that we're working together to move the needle forward.
Yep.
Absolutely. So, and finally, I think it ties back to, ultimately the funding that is required. We have a significant roadmap with a lot of needs. How can families be part of this journey and helping us to continue to progress this roadmap?
Yeah, and I think it's no surprise, I think, to anybody that research takes money, and it takes a lot of money. And the challenge is in our rare space with few people, it can come in slow and then it goes out fast, right? If we're raising money, in $1,000 campaigns at a time, we're ultimately making grants that are a minimum $50,000, right? And we ultimately need to be working our way up to, at least over $100,000 grants, really, to make the progress that we need to see. And so I can't overstate enough like how big the need is to bring additional dollars into the organization that we can use to fund these studies and support this work. And I think there really is power in numbers, and we have seen time and again, a family will reach out to me and say, I don't think I can do much, but I'm willing to give it a try. And raising that $1,000 at a time, $500 at a time, with everybody activated in our community, it really does make a difference. And I think one of the things that I am proudest to say about our organization is that it is funded by families. We really don't have external funding until this year, and with the Speak Corey grant that we just got, we really did not have external funding. It's all come from connections to families within our our disease community, and that's just, it's really cool and it's really powerful.
Absolutely. I mean, to know that all of you are making such a big difference in changing the lives of our families and driving this organization forward. I just want to reiterate our thanks to all of you. And we're coming up now here on the holiday season, and so I highly encourage everyone to check out our website. There's a tremendous amount of resources for Giving Tuesday. You can easily launch a fundraiser and customize a web page that's accessible for anyone, with photos and videos of your child. There's a lot of information that easily populates there, and this is a great time to reach out to everyone in this giving season and encourage them to be part of this and making an improvement in the lives of our children.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the stories of families are so powerful and so significant that I was talking to another parent, and she said, it just continues to surprise me who is willing to help us. And I think that's absolutely true from a fundraising perspective, is anybody who knows your family is a potential contributor to this work and the progress that we're making. And the theme of our end of year campaign is be a part of the progress. And that's really what that is a call to do, is to activate everybody in our community to really be a part of the progress that we are making. We are making progress. It's slow and we have a lot of steps, but we're moving the needle.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much all for joining us today. We hope you'll start your own Giving Tuesday fundraisers, and we hope to see you next year at the conference in Baltimore in 2024. Thanks, everyone. Best wishes for the holiday season.
Thank you.